There are between an estimated 1.6 and 3.8 million sports-related concussions in the United States every year. Junior Seau was a Pro Bowl linebacker for the San Diego Chargers as well as the New England Patriots. He played for 20 years before retiring in 2010. At the age of 43, Junior Seau committed suicide by a self-inflicted gunshot wound to the chest. Junior Seau was diagnosed with chronic traumatic encephalopathy post-mortem. Seau showed no other signs of depression during his time in retirement. 1 year prior to Junior Seau's death, Chicago Bears safety Dave Durson died of a self-inflicted gunshot wound in a similar manner that Junior Seau took his own life. Prior to his death, he stated that he wanted to have his brain examined by neuroscientists because he felt that there was something going on in his head. Chris Borland, a linebacker for the San Francisco 49ers, recently retired from the Professional Football League after his rookie season. The average salary for an NFL linebacker is well into the millions, but despite that, Chris Borland opted out of continuing his career in the NFL, citing concerns for his health and the well-being of his family. Borland's controversial retirement sheds light on some of the issues with concussions and the resulting CTE in the hard-hitting professional world of football. I bring up this story today because I want to talk about concussions and their ramifications on athletes. I will be addressing their prevalence in professional sports and what the NFL is doing currently to minimize this underestimated and dangerous injury. I will also be discussing some of the changes that are being implemented in protective equipment, as well as that at the youth sports level, in order to minimize these concussions. Taking a look at what's going on in an athlete's brain as a result of concussions, we know that traumatic brain injuries and stroke often lead to cell death of neurons and the cells responsible for regulating material around the brain. We also see disruption in the blood flow and in the blood-brain barrier. The blood-brain barrier is an important membrane in the brain that protects and regulates the passage of materials between the blood and the cells of the brain. The frontal lobe is responsible for voluntary movements, decision-making, emotion and mood, among many other important functions. Damage to just this area of the brain often results in patients who display impulsive behaviors, loss of motivation, and may even develop substance abuse problems. A recent study was conducted on 86 professional athletes who had experienced forms of brain trauma. What was found was that 80%, or 68 of these people examined, had different stages of chronic traumatic encephalopathy, which results in this gradual loss of brain tissue. In early cases of CTE, we see patients with mild headaches and attention problems. But in more developed cases, we see dementia, depression, and other forms of severe neurodegeneration. This nice visual, as you can tell, has many forms of sports injuries, with knee injuries being the most prominent. So if knee injuries are so abundant, then why not talk about these problems rather than the TBIs that I just discussed about? Despite the astounding number of knee injuries, TBIs far outweigh other injuries because of the long-term consequences. For example, knee injuries can be easily resolved with simple surgery or physical therapy. Recovery from knee injuries can span between 3 to 9 months. However, for brain injuries, on the other hand, we leave a permanent effect on the injured and will only get worse over time. As our society continues to commodify athletes and the nature of sports leans farther into making gladiators out of athletes, much of the responsibility falls on governing leagues, coaches, and officials to regulate and ensure player safety. Let's look at how the NFL now is handling the concerns of players like Chris Borland. This culture of sport creates a pressure that prevents players, coaches, and officials from making informed and rational decisions. Therefore, the NFL implements a key measure to minimize this pressure. According to the NFL, there is always an eye in the sky who watches live plays as well as replays during a game from a stadium box in order to assess if players may need medical attention. Off the game field, players are evaluated for current symptoms and medical history before the season even begins. They are administered baseline neuropsychological tests that assess cognitive skills, including memory and reaction time. After injuries, players retake these assessments, and the results are compared to their baseline tests. Players are also critically evaluated by a neurotrauma expert external to the NFL in order to be cleared to step back on the field. Athletic trainers and third-party neurologists monitor these players' symptoms and evaluate the athletes based on their symptoms and not the calendar. With regards to the field rules, NFL regulations require athletes to leave the field if they have suspected to have sustained a concussion. Additionally, NFL rules state that players cannot launch themselves off the ground to strike another player to everyone on the field. Additionally, return to play protocols provide a necessary layer of padding when a player does receive an injury. These protocols are intended to ensure athletes get the adequate rest from contact immediately following a serious injury and will prevent immediate re-injury that could be season-ending or life-threatening. There's a great deal of controversy concerning these protocols, citing that while they are valuable in theory, they limit athletes' autonomy and are not implemented effectively. It's true that a large proportion of athletes surveyed admit that they have ignored return-to-play protocols, either by their own free will or by the pressures of a coach. The increasing severity of return-to-play protocols has been shown to increase the level of underreporting of concussions we see from players and coaches due to the social and competitive pressures of the sport. When rules, coaches, and trainers are not doing their part to prevent injuries, serious long-term ramifications manifest. Some of the symptoms of concussions take months and years to become evident. In 2013, the NFL reached a $765 million settlement with over 4,500 former players, including the family of Junior Seau. The case was against the NFL for concealing the dangers of concussions and for glorifying and profiting from the epic hits that caused these head injuries. The NFL supports that safety is their top priority, but athletes have a different perspective, especially when hindsight is 20/20 and more traumatic brain injury research is released. America loves football, and we love glorifying these athletes. Based on the culture of sport that is ingrained in every player, coach, manager, and fan, we can conclude that the high-impact nature of the sport of football is not going away. What can we do as a society to make this game safer rather than softer? There are two main ways we can move forward in a healthy direction. The first way to ensure a safer rather than softer game is by continually investing in the production of new cutting-edge technology. There have been many technological advances to help prevent concussions. Recently, helmets are becoming equipped with sophisticated padding as well as multiple impact structural capabilities. New helmet technology also includes mini airbags and rotational devices that mimic the brain's protective mechanisms. Additionally, some helmets contain sensors that are linked to a computer on the sideline. These sensors tell trainers the magnitude of the force at which each player is hit. If the impact was large enough, the computer will report that the player needs to come off the field because that player is at risk of a concussion or has just sustained one. However, with players getting bigger and hitting harder, it's hard to make a helmet that can absolutely guarantee a player's safety. Luckily, youth football organizations across the country have begun implementing mandatory classes for youth coaches to take. By teaching coaches the signs and symptoms of concussions, this instills the value of protecting a player's health earlier on. Proper football equipment assessment is another concern for youth organizations. In youth football, about 25 to 30% of equipment doesn't fit properly. Measuring for equipment needs more attention in order for the equipment to be more effective. Lastly, coaches need to teach their youth players how to correctly hit and be tackled. By learning early, players will reduce the risk of head injuries as their career progresses. Better information and implementation of these strategies at the youth level will equip youth athletes to be best prepared for their future, be it in sports or any dream that they may pursue. Addressing these pressures at a young age is the best way to change the culture of sport and keep athletes healthier for the rest of their lives. I hate seeing players full of talent and Hall of Fame potential walking out on a game we all love so much. By implementing measures to keep athletes safer, healthier, and stronger, we can grab a beer and some salsa and get ready for some football. Thank you and have a good day.